What's up, fellas? In the first of today's videos, we're going to be taking a look at the most interesting free agent from every single team. Because me personally, once the trade deadline's over, I start to focus, at least from like a team building perspective, on free agency. Of course, we've got actual on the court stuff that's happening the rest of the way, and I'm going to talk about that plenty as we move towards the postseason. But there's a lot of really interesting free agents as we go towards the offseason. I'm going to talk about the most interesting one from every single team in this video. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. If you're new here, by the way, what's up? My name is Tucker. I upload NBA content on this channel twice a day, every single day. So it's a great place for the most consistent NBA content on YouTube. If you enjoy the content, you can leave a like rating on it. And if you want to hang out with me outside of these videos, you can check me out at various socials in a Linktree link down in the description below. Just so you guys know, the second video of the day, I'm going to be talking about the vetoed Chris Paul trade, some of the false narratives that are kind of going around about that right now as it relates to this current Nets team. That's gonna be the second video of the day. But in the first one, we're going to talk about the most interesting free agent from every team. So we're gonna go in order from, I believe I did this in order of the teams with the highest payroll, which first up is the Golden State Warriors and Kelly Oubre. We're gonna go through these relatively fast. Oubre is interesting just because, you know, he's someone that I could see getting paid about what he's getting paid right now on a longer term deal, which is about $17 million a year. If the Warriors are the team that retains him, they're going to have to take on a significant financial cost to do so, considering that that's going to put them, you know, well into the luxury tax, which they're already paying this year. Then you get into the repeater tax, then you've got Steph, who needs an extension coming up. Draymond's already signed long term, Clay's signed long term, and suddenly the Warriors are paying a ton of money. But they also know that they have a chance to be a really good team, especially, you know, depending on what they do with the Wiseman and Timberwolves pick combo in terms of their assets. On the open market, considering that there's not a ton of fantastic free agents out there, I think Oubre could get a relatively significant deal, especially if he keeps playing better as he has lately. So he's an interesting one to keep an eye on there in Golden State. Next up, the Nets. Bruce Brown suddenly has become a wildly interesting free agent. Maybe not so much in the open market. Maybe there aren't a ton of other teams looking around like, hey, I really want to go and pay Bruce Brown money. But more so for the Nets and their ability to retain him, because he is actually a significant part of this roster, is kind of just a do everything, energy and effort guy. And let's say they do play really well in the postseason this year. Losing guys like him are one of the reasons why championship teams either don't repeat or start to decline if the Nets do end up winning the title this year. It's because they're unable to retain guys like this that are really, really critical. Next up, the Sixers. Danny Green, not much to say here. He's been kind of a guy that's been jumping around to a bunch of different teams year after year anyway, but is a good shooter for them, and they would probably like to retain him, but what his value is at this point in his career is kind of unclear. The Clippers, Reggie Jackson. He's the only free agent on the roster. He's not that interesting. The Lakers, Talen Horton-Tucker, who's a restricted free agent, someone that is one of the few, you know, could be seen as real legit long-term assets on this roster. But again, you know, there are salary concerns here with the Lakers, not as it relates to the luxury tax, but as it relates to their flexibility to be able to sign free agents this offseason and the following. You can put Montrezl Harrell on this list as well if you want to, but the restricted free agency of Talen Horton-Tucker to me personally is more interesting. We'll see what the Lakers do, but I feel like there would be at least some sort of significant motivation for them to retain him this offseason. I'm just not sure what that number would be. Next up now, the Milwaukee Bucks. Jrue Holiday on a player option. It's a $27 million player option. It's weird because I would assume he would opt out, but I also don't think that there's a scenario in which the Bucks don't pay everything they possibly have to pay to retain Jrue Holiday. They gave up so much in terms of their future picks that there's just no way they're going to let this be a rental. It seems like Holiday enjoys it there. It seems like it's a great chance for him to win a title. I don't see a huge reason for him to go somewhere else unless he just wants to get as much money as possible. But even then, the Bucks have the ability to offer Jrue Holiday more money than anybody else. I would imagine they're going to retain him, but that would be a scary proposition for Bucks fans. Not only the possibility of losing him, assuming he does decline the player option, but also what you would end up paying Jrue Holiday long term, as he would now be 30 years old this offseason. All things to consider and all things to add to an interesting free agency case there for Milwaukee. Next up, Utah. Kind of a similar thing, except with an older guy. Mike Conley makes like 30-something million this year, is having an all-star caliber season. Where do you draw the line? 2 years, 60? Like, does he just kind of keep doing the Kyle Lowry thing where he keeps getting relatively short, big number deals? The Jazz have to consider the fact that they signed Gobert to the extension, Donovan Mitchell to an extension. You know, is Mike Conley going to be getting, you know, a 4-year deal from the Jazz? Is there another team that's going to swoop in and say, hey, we really like to have Mike Conley here, have all the money we can give you? I don't know. That's another one that just kind of makes me nervous, or would make me nervous if I was a fan of that team. The Heat, Victor Oladipo, we've talked about this a ton. I would imagine that they're going to try and retain him depending on how he plays for them, but he is certainly one to keep an eye on. The Wizards, Jerome Robinson, restricted. Not a ton to talk about here just because there's not many options for them in terms of their own free agents, but a guy that, you know, is former lottery pick, could get some kind of money out there. We never know. The Pelicans, Lonzo Ball. I think there's a scenario in which Lonzo Ball gets like $20 million a year this offseason. I really do. I think a lot of teams like him. I think a team like Chicago specifically could be motivated to go out and get him, depending on how they can kind of work out their salary cap space. Maybe a potential sign and trade here for Lonzo. But I think the Pelicans are aware that Lonzo has a significant amount of value, but they're also aware of their long-term salary concerns, whether that be as a result of the Ingram extension, the eventual Zion extension, the Bledsoe and Adams money that is for some reason on their payroll. So it's possible Lonzo goes somewhere else, but again, as always, with restricted free agents, as there are many of them on this list, you never really exactly know what's going to happen because of that whole offer sheet mechanic. The Blazers, not a ton of options. Zach Collins as a restricted free agent is at least mildly interesting. Someone that has been underwhelming to this point through his rookie contract, but still could be an interesting guy. The Rockets, Dante Exum, I guess, not really much to talk about there. The Timberwolves, Jared Vanderbilt, same thing. It's either him or Ed Davis. I think Jared Vanderbilt is an interesting player, but as a free agent, it's not like he's going to be getting $10 million a year here. The Celtics, Evan Fournier, a guy that they just traded for. He's not super old. He'll be like 29 this offseason, and depending on how he plays in Boston, could be looking at, you know, 15 a year again for Evan Fournier. I don't know if Boston's going to be the team to pay that, considering, you know, the fact that Smart will need a new extension soon. You've obviously got Kemba, you've got Brown, you've got Tatum that are signing long-term deals. So I don't know how motivated they're going to be to retain him, depending on how he plays for them, but still could be a guy that could get a significant number on the open market. The Bulls, Garrett Temple, not many options there. The Grizzlies, again, not many options. The only guy that could be a free agent for them this offseason is Justice Winslow on a team option. I don't think they're going to decline the team option on Justice Winslow, but he was the only choice. The Cavs, Jared Allen, restricted. Super interesting. I think the Cavs are already recognizing that Jared Allen is a really good young player and someone they would like to retain. But just like Lonzo, like I could see, you know, a team that has a lot of cap space potentially offering 20 a year for Jared Allen. Now, what team would that be? I don't know. But when there's not a ton of options out there in terms of free agents, you know, there are going to be teams like, you know, Orlando isn't a great fit here, but for the Lonzo thing specifically, like Orlando could have $20 million in cap space this offseason and see one of these restricted guys as an opportunity to add to their core, you know, of the other guys in the picks that they've already added through all these various trades. The restricted guys are going to be very interesting to watch this offseason, and Jared Allen is just another example. The Nuggets, Will Barton has a player option for $14 million. I could see him declining that to try and get a bigger number, or at least on a longer term. Guy to keep an eye on there. The Suns, Frank Kaminsky is shockingly valuable to their roster, but not a ton of options there, but still someone that's interesting, could get some money. The Spurs, DeMar DeRozan. Very little, if any, DeMar DeRozan trade buzz up until the deadline, or at least the day of the deadline. They're either confident that they don't really care if he leaves or that they can retain him. I think he likes it in San Antonio, but there could be a team that kind of swoops in, or he could be a kind of guy that, you know, takes a discount somewhere to try and win a title. That's certainly possible. The Mavs, Tim Hardaway Jr., another guy that is a good player and could get a significant number as a free agent, maybe a bit more of a significant one than people would assume. The Pacers, Doug McDermott, not a ton of options here, but it'd be interesting to see what, you know, a really good shooting specialist like McDermott could get on the open market. The Raptors, Kyle Lowry, of course. He's a $30 million expiring this offseason. Do the Raptors want to retain him? Is there another team that'll swoop in? Does he, you know, actually end up leaving Toronto? Do they, you know, do they sign and trade him? Lots of interesting possibilities there with him. The Pistons, not a ton of options. I picked Dennis Smith Jr., but not incredibly interesting there. Same thing with the Magic, Otto Porter Jr., big expiring number. Maybe he gets, you know, a $10 million deal somewhere. I don't know. The Hawks, John Collins, of course. We talked about John Collins' restricted free agency for 2.5 years now. Where he ends up going, how much he ends up getting paid, how motivated Atlanta is to keep him. Is there a sign and trade involved? These other expenses they have on the roster from their most recent offseason impede them from signing John Collins. All those things are going to be things to take a look at. The Hornets actually get a bonus here. They get Devontae Graham and Malik Monk. They get 2 entries. Super interesting young free agent choices here for both Graham and Monk. They could both get significant numbers, and depending on where the Hornets are at, they might not want to retain them. Those guys both could be on new teams. The Kings, Rashawn Holmes is going to kind of give us an indicator of what the Kings want to do with their future. He's only making $5 million. I think he's at least a relatively valuable player to them, but the big man market has been a little bit weird in the past. Maybe he goes back on like a $7 million a year deal. Who knows? The Knicks and Thunder, Frank Ntilikina, Justin Jackson, respectively, not a ton of options on either of those rosters. But that is as quick as I can go through the most interesting free agent from every single NBA team. Lots of possibilities here. It's going to be a very interesting offseason. As you can see, the restricted guys make up a lot of these interesting ones. You know, unrestricted include, you know, Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Mike Conley, Victor Oladipo, different kind of free agents from what we've experienced over the last couple of years. But I think more than anything, the restricted guys are going to kind of set the trend and the tempo of how this offseason goes. Maybe they're all retained and it's a bit of a quieter offseason, but if those guys start moving around, it's going to get very interesting very quickly. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like rating. Let me know down in the comment section below who you think maybe some more interesting free agents are. And yeah, hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.